Well, I sure thought we'd have a lot more to talk about on this episode of Ball Don't Lie, but apparently the Bengals are basically done trying to get the team better. And that's a problem. Let's talk about it. That coffee is delicious. Hi, hello, welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 179. My name is Austin Elmore. Thank you for being here. When we talked last week, I was pretty happy. I was pretty happy with what the Bengals had done. They had signed Boye Mafe and Brian Cook, and they had really set themselves up nicely to go after one of those linebackers, and they had put themselves in a position to continue to be active in free agency, and then they didn't really do anything else. We'll talk about that today. We'll also talk about how I kind of called my shot at the end of the episode last week when I said Trey Hendrickson's a Baltimore Raven. I wouldn't hate that. Well, Trey Hendrickson is a Baltimore Raven. We'll talk about that. And because of what's happened in free agency, there is now a shift, I believe, in the process that the Bengals will take. Not necessarily the process that the Bengals will take, but what I think the Bengals will do when it comes to the 2026 NFL draft coming up in just over a month in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We'll talk about all of that. But first, I have two things I need to talk about. Number one, a couple of weeks ago, I got on here and I told this terrible story about how one of my packages had been stolen. And I had ordered this hat that I wanted, this 2311 racing hat that I thought was cool. And it had been delivered and left on the porch at the front of my apartment building, and then it was gone. I was very angry about this because don't steal people's packages. And I've dealt with this a lot over the years. And I was mad. I was pissed. And I spent $40 on the hat. And then on top of that, the customer service situation with Fanatics and with the people who shipped it was not easy, was not fun. So I was madder than a wet hornet, some might say, and about not getting this hat. And then the next day, for whatever reason, I normally don't go out the front where all the packages are. I normally go out the back. For whatever reason, I'm like, I'm just going to go out the front today and see if it's there, see if somebody had a change of heart. And wouldn't you know it, they did. The box had been opened and retaped shut with my hat in there perfectly intact. So I'm going to hope, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that somebody picked the package up thinking it was their package, never even looked at the label, opened it up and realized, oh crap, this doesn't belong to me, and brought it back. I hope that's what happened. Either way, I'm glad I got my hat back and I feel better about it. And yeah, so I'm thankful for that. And I forgot to tell you that story like 2 weeks ago. Here's the hat right here. You can see it. It's a little bit dusty because it's been sitting there by the window, but that's the hat. If you're watching on YouTube, it's really dusty. Wow. I've worn it a couple times, I promise. I might wear it again today. And the other thing I want to tell you about is what I got to do this weekend. I got to give a big shout out and a thank you to the Sydney Vespa Quarterback Club, who allowed me to come in and be an MC for the Night at the Races event, which is an event they put on every year to raise a bunch of money for the Vespa Quarterback Club and help support the athletic programs at Sydney High School, where I'm from, if you don't know that. And I got some Sydney swag on today. And I appreciate them for letting me do that. It was a blast. I had so much fun. Got to see a lot of people that I haven't seen in a long time. And we raised over $20,000, almost $25,000 for the quarterback club. And that helps support all the athletic programs and most notably football for Sydney High School. And I had a blast doing it. So I'm really thankful and glad that I was able to do that. And I hope that I get asked to come back again next year. Either way, I'm probably going to show up next year because it was a lot of fun. So that was really cool. And I'm thankful for that. So let's get into the nitty gritty here of the Bengals. I'm going to take another drink of coffee. I'm frustrated by the fact that they haven't done more. And I think a lot of Bengals fans are frustrated by the fact that they haven't done more. And when you first see these moves on paper, the Boye Mafe, the Brian Cook, you think, okay, great. These are guys the Bengals have invested some money in, but they still have plenty of cap space and they'll still be able to make this work and go and get a linebacker. It was later that night on day one of free agency that they were apparently in on Devin Lloyd until the very end, the linebacker from Jacksonville. So then you shift your attention to Leo Chanel and Caden Ellis, the linebackers from Kansas City and Atlanta, guys that would fit exactly what Duke Tobin and Al Golden had talked about the Bengals needing that type of linebacker that can play on the edge, that can blitz, that can provide a veteran presence, that can provide leadership to that room, that can just be a linebacker that helps the other two young guys, Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter, be better at what they need to be instead of trying to put them in different situations that maybe is not as aligned with their skill set. Well, come to find out, according to Paul Dehner Jr., the Bengals were never seriously in on Devin Lloyd, and the reports about them being into towards the end were a bit of a fallacy. They had no interest apparently whatsoever in Caden Ellis, and they had no interest apparently whatsoever in Leo Chanel, which if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out because I don't understand how guys that perfectly fit what you need to do are right there and are within your budget and you don't go and sign them. It makes me wonder about the Bengals' evaluation and belief in their linebackers. It also makes me wonder if we're going to see Boye Mafe as that person who is kind of doing a little bit of both and almost in that stand-up linebacker role where sometimes he'll be standing up on the edge and sometimes he'll be dropping back into coverage. I don't know if I love that idea because if you invest the money that you invest into a Boye Mafe, you're doing it so that he'll get after the quarterback. And he does have the athletic traits and the ability to absolutely drop back in coverage. And maybe we'll see some of that. I'm not saying not giving up on that, but we've talked in the past how sometimes the Bengals will sign free agents and try to change what they do and mold what they do into something that the Bengals want them to do, and it doesn't always work. A perfect example of this would be Nick Scott with the Carolina or with the Bengals after he came here from the Los Angeles Rams. He had never really played the safety position the way that the Bengals asked him to play it. He wasn't good. He was horrible, and it didn't help that team. So another example would be Dax Hill. They draft him in the first round and move him to safety right away. He was a cornerback. And a couple years later, he's back to being a cornerback because he couldn't play safety. And the Bengals have repeatedly tried to fix that safety spot. Those are just a couple of examples of how the Bengals will sometimes try to do that. And it makes me wonder what the exact plan is going to be with Boye Mafe and if the Bengals are going to maybe have him do more of that stuff than a traditional just rush the passer. And so they make those two moves. We come to find out that they're not really interested in linebacker. It makes you wonder what the plan at linebacker is. And oh, by the way, you still have a big hole on the defensive line. Well, they did make a move and they signed Jonathan Allen, veteran defensive tackle, spent last year with the Minnesota Vikings. Before that was with the Washington Commanders. He's 31 years old. They signed him to a 2-year, $26 million deal. It can get up to $28 million with incentives. It's a pretty low base salary in year number one. And there's some offsetting, dollar amounts that Minnesota has to pay because they cut him. Long story short, Jonathan was not very productive last year in Minnesota. There are some believe that that is, again, part of the scheme that Brian Flores used there and maybe didn't allow Jonathan Allen's talents to show as much as they had in years past, like when they did when he was in Washington. But I think he's a good defensive tackle that still has some juice. I think he's better than Chris Jenkins. I think he's better than McKinley Jackson. I think he's better than TJ Slayton when it comes to being able to rush the passer. And that's what the Bengals are looking for from the interior. I think he's actually very similar of a player to BJ Hill. And BJ Hill tweeted out a big smiling emoji when the Bengals made the move because I think BJ knows this makes him better. And so what the Bengals are banking on, and to go back into the linebacker conversation, is that, okay, well, if we have a veteran D tackle and Jonathan Allen, who's up there with BJ Hill, and we've got Boye Mafe on the edge, and Miles Murphy has been who we expect him to be, and we expect a year two leap from Shamar Stewart, and we've improved the back end of the defense with Brian Cook at safety, well, then all those things are going to combine to make life easier on the young linebackers, and they will be better. Okay, I can understand that logic, but you cannot and you never should use hope as a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. You can't just hope that those guys are going to get better. You don't have depth at any of those positions. You don't have depth at linebacker, you don't have depth at corner, you don't have depth at safety, and nobody loves their depth in their defensive line, although it's probably the deepest position on the defense. So, one injury and that goes out the window. That's the type of stuff that they've got to clean up between now and training camp. And so you combine that with the idea that the Bengals, the way that they've structured these contracts is that there is more annual money per year in the year one that has a bigger effect on the cap this year that reduces their ability to go and sign some of those other players. And that's been a frustrating thing. And a lot of people on Bengals Twitter have talked about this. And I know Joe Goodberry has been doing breakdowns on it, and others have as well. Simply put, the Bengals have used more of their year one cap space than they need to because it gives them flexibility down the line and it doesn't kind of lock them into an agreement down the line. It creates more cap space down the line. I get that. And it mitigates the risk. Totally understand where they're coming from. But the issue is you can't be playing for 2027 and 2028. You need to be playing for 2026. It's about winning right now. And when you structure contracts that way, it becomes a lot harder to sign other guys that you need to sign so that you can maximize this roster. We've talked about a swing tackle to the depth of the offensive line. They still don't really have corners that anybody feels good about. A safety position, they've lost 2 and gained 1. Tyson Anderson is still out there. Like, there's still a lot of holes on this team that need to be filled. And it's hard to understand why they continue to do this and make things harder on themselves right away. Now, they can look at it and say, well, see, we spent all the way up to the cap, and that's fine. That's a good thing. But you didn't have to spend all the way up to the cap because you've got cap space in years to come. You could restructure Joe Burrow's contract, which you haven't. There's all these other avenues that you could take that could allow you to still get good players and be more aggressive in the pursuit of those players in free agency that the Bengals just haven't done. It is an issue when it comes to the way this team operates that will limit their ability to build out championship caliber rosters. It's unfortunately just the way they operate. I wish it was different. I wish that they would change. They've had little morsels and little crumbs of change when it comes to like void years here and there, but not enough of it. And it's maddening because you look at this roster and yeah, the moves that they've made are good, but they aren't good enough. It's not just, hey, get back to the 20th ranked defense. We talked about that on this show and on the air. I've changed my mind on that. I used to be like, yeah, just get to a mid-level defense and you'll be fine. Well, it's not the case. You need to have a top 10 defense. You need to have depth at your offensive line. You need to have better players that can come in and fill roles when guys go down. Like, just overall, the roster is not in a very good spot. It's fine, but it's not as good as it could be. And that's the issue with the Bengals that I think is so frustrating. They did make another signing. They signed Josh Johnson, the veteran quarterback who's been around for like 23 or 22 years. This is going to be his third stint with the Bengals. I think he's played with 15 or 16 NFL teams, maybe 20 teams altogether when you consider the CFL and the UFL and the USFL and all this other stuff that he's played. Josh Johnson is right now the backup quarterback to Joe Burrow. The Bengals quarterback room looks like this: Joe Burrow, Josh Johnson, Sean Clifford. A lot of Bengals fans were like, well, what does this mean for Joe Flacco? I just think it means, hey, Joe, you take your time, and I think Flacco will take his time. We still want you, but in the meantime, we need a veteran backup quarterback who can operate this offense throughout the offseason program and somebody that we feel we can trust in the event that Joe Burrow goes down. That's who Josh Johnson is. Joe Flacco has said he wants to be a starter. He wants to compete for a starting job. And if he doesn't get that, then he'd be open to coming back to Cincinnati. I view Josh Johnson as a placeholder until that decision is made. It's a good move by the Bengals. I'm glad they did it. I also am really interested to see what Sean Clifford does in the offseason. I know that's crazy to think, but Sean has invested a lot in himself and his brand, and he's back home in his hometown of Cincinnati. He went to St. X, and he's working really hard. He's about to be a father. He understands like this is like maybe his last shot in the NFL, and just the way he's approached it, I think has been really cool. It's been interesting to watch, and I hope he comes to camp and challenges whoever that number two quarterback is going to be. I think that would be fun. I think that would be neat. I think the Bengals will still add another quarterback between now and the end of the offseason. Either they draft one or they'll pick up an undrafted free agent or something like that going into training camp just to have one more body there, just because that's typically what they do. The other thing, to kind of keep going about the linebackers, like very clearly, they feel like they don't need new linebackers. The way that they've approached free agency and really weren't interested in Ellis or Chanel or Lloyd tells me that they believe in this linebacking core and kind of that plan that I told you about. They still need to get one. I would expect they're going to draft one, but that room is very, very thin right now. Like it's special teams caliber guys and Carter and Knight. Now, there's a veteran out there in Bobby Wagner who I would love to have. I don't know that he's going to be prime Bobby Wagner of 10 years ago when he was the best player on defense in the NFL, but he's a Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year. He can show those young guys how to prepare and how to study. He can show them, all the different aspects of what it takes to be a pro, and he would be able to be on a competitive roster, which I expect I shouldn't say competitive roster because I don't know if the roster is competitive right now, but a team that's competitive with a great quarterback that you feel like can get back to the postseason. I think that's what Bobby Wagner wants. I would sign him. I don't know that they will. I don't know if Bobby's interested, but either way, there's another guy out there in Akeem Davis-Gaither, a former Bengal who's available and maybe can provide some of that. And that kind of makes sense. But other than that, because of the way that they've approached this free agency, there's not a bunch of good players remaining out there. And it makes you wonder, okay, well, are they going to double dip back into the linebacker market in the draft and go through this same problem all over again with young rookie linebackers that are trying to learn how to play at the NFL level? That's a risk that I don't want the Bengals to take, but I feel like they're going to be taking. So because of the way they've done all this, because of the way that they've gone through free agency and they've currently built the roster, there are a couple of positions that really, really need work. One of them being linebacker. The other is cornerback. And we've gotten some news about the way the Bengals are approaching the cornerback situation. So Dax Hill and DJ Turner are both up for contract extensions. And Dax Hill was solid last year coming off of an ACL, and the Bengals had the fifth-year option on him. DJ Turner was magnificent last year, one of the legit best cornerbacks in the NFL, and turned into a lockdown corner. And I think he's deserving of an extension. Well, the Bengals, according to Paul Dehner Jr. in his reporting, haven't really approached or gotten deep into those negotiations and don't plan on doing so until after the draft. This is another one of those things that they do that drives everyone crazy. If you would just get the extensions on the books that would clarify your free agency picture, would clarify your year 2 picture, would clarify your year 3 picture, and you would have a better understanding of this. But the Bengals are going to really get into those negotiations after the draft and going into the regular season. Oftentimes, we've seen these deals done right at the beginning of the season, right after training camp ends or right in the middle of training camp. Just a couple of examples: Geno Atkins, Joe Mixon, Carlos Dunlap, AJ Green, Joe Burrow. All those dudes got contract extensions done right in the middle of training camp or right before the season is about to start. So for that reason, I expect this to take a little bit of time. This is going to take a little while to figure out what those guys are going to be. Now, what's interesting is they both have the same agent, much like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins had last year. So maybe there's something similar to that could be in the works, and that makes sense. But when you look at the Bengals roster, you have Dax Hill, DJ Turner, Josh Newton as your slot corner, or excuse me, Jalen Davis as your slot corner, Josh Newton as cornerback number 4. You've lost Marco Wilson. You have DJ Ivey, who I thought was okay towards the end of last year, and that's pretty much it. The cornerback position is one of the most important positions in football. You need to have depth there. Guys are always dropping like flies at that position and getting hurt and getting injured and all that. And Cam Taylor Britt, by the way, has left and gone to the Indianapolis Colts. So there's no depth, I feel like, comfortable depth in that position group. And then when you consider the fact that both those guys are up for contract extensions and the future with Cincinnati is very much unclear, it makes you wonder, okay, does this now affect how they approach the NFL draft? We did a mock draft live on the air on ESPN 1530 this week, and all the guys that you would want, they were gone. Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, Ruben Bain, Francis Maui Noah, all of the dudes that you would want, David Bailey, Arvell Reese, all of them were gone. The best available player on the board for the Bengals when we got to the pick was Carnell Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State. And if it's up to me, yeah, I would love to have Carnell Tate play for the Bengals, but I know how the Bengals operate, so I'm assuming they're going to now draft a corner. There's two corners that we'll get into in an episode maybe later next week that are going to probably be there at number 10. One is Mansour Delane. He's a corner from LSU, and the other is Jamad McCoy, a corner from Tennessee. Jamad McCoy missed all of last season with an ACL injury, and Mansour Delane was hurt as well. So both of those guys have some medical issues that you have to look at, but it just get the feeling, and the Bengals have also historically drafted corners in the first round, guys like Dax Hill, Darquez Dennard, William Jackson III, Trey Kirkpatrick. They love the positional value of a cornerback in round number 1. For that reason, I'm shifting my belief that I think the Bengals are now going to draft a cornerback in round number 1 because they don't know the future of those two and they haven't gotten into the negotiations yet, and they always draft to replace. That's just what they do. They did it with the tackles trying to replace Andrew Whitworth a couple of years ago. They did it with Dax Hill trying to replace Jesse Bates. Like, they constantly draft to replace. They draft for need instead of the draft the best player available. Because of their inability in free agency to get the right guys in and spend the money and maximize the cap the way that they're supposed to, they've once again painted themselves into a corner in which their number one need in round 1 of the NFL draft is going to be a cornerback. And by the way, these guys might be really good and they might help the team, and that's a good thing. No problem with that. The issue is you've put yourself in a position where, okay, well, we didn't sign any corners. We didn't sign any linebackers. We didn't sign enough defensive linemen. So we're going to have to pick one of these guys, as opposed to, what if Jeremiah Love's there? What if Carnell Tate's there? And we can get the best player available. It's a maddening part of the way the Bengals do business. But I think as of right now, I'm changing my mind. Previously, I said defensive tackle. I think as of April or March 18th, the Bengals are going to take a cornerback in round number 1 with that selection. So that's the latest on that, and obviously I'm grateful to Paul Danner Jr. for his reporting. By the way, shout out to Paul for having me on his podcast. That was awesome. So that pretty much sums it up, and it seems like they're done. It seems like they're not really interested in going after a lot of other guys, especially between now and the draft. And there's going to be pro days and a bunch of other stuff that gets done. And I'm curious to see what that looks like and who the Bengals are linked to in that process. We'll get some pre-draft visits and that sort of stuff that'll start to come out. But that's where everything stands at the moment. By the way, Trey Hendrickson goes to Baltimore. As I said at the end of the show last week, I wouldn't hate it. I think Trey is a horrible run defender. He can't tackle for loss. He's not a great tackler to begin with. He's not a good teammate. People in that locker room in Cincinnati are not going to miss him whatsoever. Yeah, he's got really good, pass rush metrics, and there's obviously an incredible amount of talent there. And I would not be surprised if he has a productive season with Baltimore, but I think it's funny and fishy the way everything went down with Max Crosby, who, by the way, Max Crosby said they flew him to D.C. instead of Baltimore and then made him drive to Baltimore, didn't meet with the head coach or the GM for the first 5 hours he was there. And when he finally did, they came in and told him his medicals were a reason they were going to pull out of the trade. Meanwhile, the Trey Hendrickson thing was at the finish line, and that's what happened. So Baltimore is a shady and slimy organization, at least based off of that whole situation. And I'm very curious to find out if anything else comes out about that and if the league is going to be able to do anything about it. And I don't know if they will because of the protection for medicals with players. But it seems like Max Crosby is going to be a Raider and he wants to be a Raider. And we'll see if maybe that, the whole distance makes the heart grow fonder thing in those couple days where they thought they were going in different directions. If maybe the Raiders had a change of heart and Max Crosby had a change of heart and they want to work together moving forward. We'll see how it goes. But that whole situation is just ridiculous. That does it for me. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me weekdays from noon to 3. I co-host Tony Pike's Cincy 360 with Tony Pike on ESPN 1530. You can also follow me on any and all social media at Auty Elmore. It's AUTYELMORE. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. Please share it with somebody. Please leave a rating. Please subscribe if you don't already. And thanks so much for being here. We'll talk to you again next week. As always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.